you taught me something. One is a plain meaning, and the other is a literal meaning.
Right. And so, all right. So I know Christians will talk a lot about, literal meaning. Like they'll say, well, I don't interpret the Bible, I just read it. And Jews hear that and they literally laugh because
they interpret it.
Any interpretation, any reading of it requires an interpretation.
Right.
Now, what you really mean is you want to interpret it based on what we call in Hebrew the pshat, the plain meaning. Pshat literally means simple or plain meaning, and the pshat is in contrast to a different method of interpretation called drash.
There you go.
Drash is where you ignore the plain meaning very deliberately. So the definition of pshat, the technical definition,
pshat, and it's what is it?
Peshin tet,
okay,
or P-E-S-H-A-T. You don't really need the E.
Got it.
There's a shva there. Pshat. So, and drash is D-E-R-A-S-H. So drash is where you dig down into, it's to seek, and it means to seek a deeper meaning, which isn't the plain meaning. And deeper meaning means it's actually not a meaning that anybody would ever arrive at or could ever arrive at just by reading it. They have to read meaning into it rather than deriving meaning from it. So the pshat, the plain meaning, is defined as the interpretation based on the language and the context using reason or common sense.
Okay.
So that's four things. Interpretation based on language and the context using reason. If you invalidate any of those four, you can't really invalidate interpretation because everything is interpretation. But if you invalidate language, context, or common sense, you're now in the field of drash. Okay. Now, why do I say pshat is not the same thing as literal meaning? Because sometimes the pshat is an allegory.
Right.
There's a famous example where Rashi, who is this Jewish commentator in the Middle Ages, Rabbi Shlomo, the son of Isaac, he's in France, and he's one of the great commentators of medieval Judaism. And he's talking about the book of Song of Songs, and he says, Pshutohu mashal. Its plain meaning is an allegory. So what does that mean?
Go. Okay.
So it's a man talking about his lover, and then the woman talking about her lover, meaning it's these two man and woman who love each other. And in some situations, he's describing different body parts, right? And so why are we being told this? That seems very strange to be in the Bible. So going back to the earliest times that we know of, this was interpreted as an allegory. Now, an allegory for what? That depends who's interpreting it. Jews interpreted it usually as an allegory of God talking about Israel. Christians interpreted it as God or Jesus talking about the church, right? And even those have varied in how you implement it. So there's this incredible. There's a translation from the Art Scroll. Art Scroll is this company that makes Bible translations or prints all kinds of books. And in their translation of the woman, I forget if it's the man talking about the woman. We'll put it up here on the screen. He talks about, I think it's the man talking about the some of the how do I put this? Physical aspects of the woman's body, which come in a pair, and they translated an Art Scroll in the text. Oh, how I love your oral law and your written law.
Did they really?
They really do. Something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. We'll put it up here on the screen. So how do they do that? Because they interpret, according to them, yes, he's talking about her bodily parts, but the plain meaning of that, according to them, is that it's an allegory for something else.
Okay.
And a better example, because maybe it is about a man and his lover, right? We don't know. Song of Songs. So an example which you really couldn't interpret literally, but it is where it says, circumcise the foreskin of your heart. So that would mean you'd have to cut open your heart and take off. Foreskin's a little flap, a little extra piece that if you remove it makes it perfect. So imagine if you had to take off.
I just couldn't stop that. I'm sorry.
Imagine if you said, that means to have open heart surgery, and you take off a little extra piece of your heart. And until the 20th century, we didn't have the technology to do open heart surgery. And now we can finally fulfill the commandment in its literal sense.
Okay.
But no, that is the literal sense, but it's not the pshat. The plain meaning is it means don't be stubborn.
Right.
And how do I know that? Because the other half of the verse says, and no longer stiffen your neck.
Right.
And they didn't have open heart surgery. So the historical context tells me it couldn't possibly mean that you need to have open heart surgery.